and also a water fountain in both places as well. So those are there. But I just wanted to say welcome. We are welcoming today Molly Beth Griffin, the author of 10 Beautiful Things and some other wonderful and amazing books that we have here at the library if you want to check them out later. So today we are really lucky to have the Center for the Book, because Ames is the Center for the Book through the Library of Congress. And that's a community that represents all U.S. states and territories to promote reading, libraries, and literacy. So that just means we want both kids and adults to love to read and to join with other people who love to read. And so once a year here, us at the Ames Public Library, we get to select one adult and one youth book that represents Iowa for the Great Reads for Great Places program. This year's selection is 10 Beautiful Things by Molly Beth Griffin, because of how beautifully it showcases wonderful places and what Iowa looks like. So, yeah, well, our author will talk more about it, but I think the kids in the book, the little girl in the book, she's moving to a farm in Iowa. Do you know anybody who lives in Iowa? Oh, right. I also live in Iowa. I don't know. I think so we are so grateful we got to bring Molly Beth Griffin here today because of the generous support of the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the National Endowment for the Humanities, with additional support from chief officers of state library agencies. And so one last thing you guys might want to do, and you'll want to keep moving because your teachers will have you moving quickly, but on the way into the building today, you might have saw in our entryway lots of pictures hanging up. That is because it's pictures of 10 beautiful places all around Iowa. Just like they're looking for 10 beautiful things, we said, tell us about 10 beautiful things and 10 beautiful places here in Iowa. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our author, Molly Beth Griffin, and give her a big round of applause, Ames style, okay? Awesome, guys. Good job. Good job.
Thank you. Is my mic working? Yes. Okay, so before I start, my kids, I have 2 kids, and when they were about your age, their music teacher had a really good way of helping kids quiet and pay attention, which was the music teacher went, and then the kids went back. Should we try it? Okay, so this is a lot of kiddos and you're really excited, which is great. But if things get a little, then I'll go. Okay, and that helps everybody focus again. So I'm Molly, and this is my book, 10 Beautiful Things. And yes, it is about Iowa. And we're going to talk about Iowa and beautiful things, and also picture books and how picture books get made. I'm going to just leap in and thank the Library of Congress and the Iowa Center for the Book, which we are in right now, which is also the Ames Public Library, and also librarian Danielle for bringing me here, which is very exciting. That's my daughter, Lenore, reading Sandra Boynton's Barnyard Dance upside down at age probably 9 months or so. So reading is important from that very, very young age. And if you love your library, come and check out books and reserve books and puppets and whatever, and tell your grown-ups because they do such awesome things for our whole communities. They wanted, when Danielle emailed me, she said, so, but are you an Iowa person? And I actually live in Minneapolis, but I am an Iowa person, and here's why. I went to college in Grinnell, which is there, and we are there, and Grinnell is there. So I spent 4 years living in Grinnell and also in Iowa City in the summers. So that was a lot of Iowa time for me. I feel like I know my way around here, at least somewhat. That's me in my Grinnell sweatshirt with my brother at college. And here's the real reason why I know Iowa, which is a lot of road trips. So this is Me on this side, and my sister, and my cousin, and my grandpa, and my other cousin, and my brother. And they all, my cousins and my grandparents live in Colorado when I was a kid. So we would drive from Minneapolis down through Iowa, across Nebraska, and into Colorado, and then do it all the way backwards through Nebraska and through Iowa and up to back home to Minneapolis. So I have driven through Iowa a lot of times in my life. And this book is actually about driving through Iowa. So I do feel like an expert in driving through Iowa. Lots and lots of freeways. And that was yesterday driving down here. Very bright sunsets in Iowa. So we're going to read the book first. And some of you have already read the book, which is really exciting to me. So we're going to read it again so that it's all fresh in your minds. And then I'm going to show you a bunch of process stuff for the book. And we're going to talk about looking for beautiful things. And yeah, that's probably what we'll have time for today. So it starts like this. And there's no words on this page aside from the title, and that it's by me, and it's illustrated by Maribel Lechuga and published by the press is called Charlesbridge. But what we see some really interesting information on this page just through the picture. We see a girl on some boxes and a grown-up packing up the car. And we're going to find out what they're up to. Are we ready? Okay. Lily ran her finger across the Iowa map. An X marked Graham's house on an empty patch of land, Lily's new home. Graham's car tires hummed against the pavement. Lily felt the vibration in her hollow chest. Let's try to find 10 beautiful things along the way, Graham said. In this picture, you can see the Minneapolis skyline in the back. So they're driving away from that. Yeah, and there's a cat. Am I the grandma? We'll talk about the sort of process behind this in just a minute. Lily turned her eyes to the window. There's nothing beautiful here, she said. She struggled to fold the map so it nestled into itself just right. You'd be surprised, Graham said. And sure enough, at that very moment, the sun broke over the long horizon. Lily gasped. There's number one, she cried. Right you are, Lily, said Graham. This is what I saw on the freeway yesterday driving down here. It was sunset, not sunrise, but she did such a good job of capturing what that looks like on those flat fields. Fence posts rushed past. Graham flipped on the radio, trying to fill the silence. Lily felt the complaint starting in her belly again, coming up her throat and nearly out her mouth. But then Graham shouted, number two. Oh, sorry. A wind farm had sprouted on the field beside the freeway. Spinning windmill blades gleamed in the morning sun. Lily concentrated on the game and found number three real fast, a red-winged blackbird perched on a swaying stalk of last year's corn. It was dark and bright all at once, its beak wide open in a song they couldn't hear. Later, Graham signaled and turned the car onto a smaller road. 2 more highways to go, she said. Lily popped a handful of crackers into her mouth, but food didn't fill up her hollow places. Graham cracked her window, and in rushed air and sound and cold. They crossed a bridge, and Graham chose number 4, the gurgly sound of a melting creek. Lily dozed off. She woke up when Graham tapped her knee and pointed out a falling apart barn. That's not pretty, Lily said. That can't count. We're not looking for pretty. We want beautiful, Graham said. So it stood halfway to 10. At a rest area, Lily bounced out of the car while Graham stretched her creaky body. Lily picked number 6. The smell of mud, she said, inhaling. Graham shut her eyes and nodded slowly. It's earthy and rich, she said. I'd never really noticed. Lily breathed in the mud smell and focused on just that. It poured itself into some of the empty spaces in her. Back on the road again, the car seemed smaller. The humming in Lily had stopped, but her legs wanted to sprawl and her stomach was getting queasy. We're on a roll now, Graham said, and she was right about that. 7 and 8 were easy, a cloud shaped like a swan, and a little brown calf that trotted beside the fence. Miles and miles later, they turned onto their last road, and the clouds began to draw close. The sky grew dark. The earth rumbled. Suddenly, the air exploded in bright flashes. Cloud banks traded lightning back and forth, showing off. Number 9, Lily whispered. There was no room for other words. The storm took up the whole world, and it filled Lily up, too. She was here with Graham, and for a whole minute, that was all that mattered. On they drove, almost there, not far now. When they'd been almost there for a long time, Graham braked, eased the car down a crumbling driveway, and parked in front of the farmhouse. Here we be, she said, through the drum of the rain. Home. But we only made it to 9, Lily said, slumping in her seat. Nope, 10 easy. Graham came around with the umbrella, and Lily stepped out of the car. We're 10, Graham said. Lily sank into her familiar hug. None of this was easy. Maybe it would never be easy, but she belonged with Graham now. She belonged here now. This place wasn't empty, and neither was she. And that's the end. And you guys are such good listeners. Oh my goodness. Thank you. So what I want to ask you first, and your teachers are going to help me pick kids with their hands up who are sitting nicely and have something to say. What do you do when you're worried or sad? What's your best strategy for that? Thank you, teachers.
Big voice, honey.
Tell me again. To hide it. Oh, okay. So you kind of keep it to yourself. Some people like to keep it to themselves. Yep, I get that. Somebody else? Distracted. What kind of things do you do to distract yourself? Playing with toys and video games. Yep. Okay, what other things can we do?
Fisher, do you want to call on a kindergarten? Carter.
Can you do a little louder for me? Going in your room like a safe space where you feel comfortable. Yeah. Maybe one more? Kindergartner?
Yeah.
Go on trips with your, or hug her mom. Yeah, a hug from a person that loves you can be like the very best thing. Talking to somebody who understands you is a good kind of thing. You know, there are lots of ways. One thing that I like to do when I'm worried or sad is go for a walk. And when I'm going for a walk, I like to look for beautiful things. Here's my kiddo. This was in the middle of lockdown, and we would go for little neighborhood walks just like twice a day and look for things, you know, beautiful things out in the world. And even if they're really tiny things, they can add up to help you feel better. So let's talk about when you can find beautiful things. And I have a lot of books about seasons, and I'm very interested in seasons. And sometimes in spring, some things that I look for are flowers and buds, like when leaves are budding on trees, and baby animals. Those are ducklings. At one of my favorite places to walk. Can anyone think of another spring thing that that is beautiful to you, teachers?
One thing that's beautiful with a big voice. I think what's beautiful is birds.
Birds. And in the spring, those birds are super active, right? And they're singing a lot. And yeah, absolutely. One more?
Samuel? A tadpole.
A tadpole? Did you say a tadpole?
Yes.
What a great idea. I love tadpoles. They're frogs, but with wiggly tails, right? And then they grow up to be frogs. It's so cool. In summer, it's almost too easy because there's all these flowers everywhere. I like to look for caterpillars in the summer. We have a lot of milkweed at my house, so we get monarch caterpillars. And my other favorite thing to watch for is loons and take pictures of loons. Does anyone have one more summer thing that you love to look for in the summer? Ducks, absolutely. And they're paddling around and then they put their little butts in the air when they're like looking for stuff in the water. I love that. Yes. Okay, in fall, now we're just at the end of fall, but obviously leaves are fun. I have a whole book about jumping in leaves. But one of the things that people sometimes forget to look for is the seed pods of plants. So when the flower petals all fall off and we don't have those big, beautiful flowers anymore, sometimes you can still see very cool seed pods. This is a clematis seed pod. Does anyone have one more thing from in fall that you like to look for? Ladybugs. You know, the bugs in the fall, they like to come into your house because your house is warm. So there's like more bugs than ever, right? In fall. But some of those bugs are really cool. Okay, winter is our last season and we're almost to winter. And some people think that's sad, but when I talk to kids, kids love winter. There is so much fun stuff to do in winter and so many beautiful things around. When the snow covers branches, I think that's very beautiful. And when there's frost on the plants and stuff in people's yards, that's beautiful to me too. One more winter thing that's beautiful to you? Tell me. Ice. Ice is cool, huh? And sometimes it cracks in interesting ways. And absolutely, I have like 100 pictures of ice. Okay, so seasons, yes. When is all the time? Where? One thing I like to do is look down, and kids are really good at looking down. Grown-ups are like, but kids are aware of what is on the ground. And sometimes I actually have a little bit of show and tell for you. I like to look for feathers. So there's one in the picture. We had a merlin that lived in our yard for a while. A merlin is a kind of hawk, a little bitty hawk, and they have these stripy tails. So we were finding these cool feathers on the ground. This one is an owl feather. Can you see how iridescent it is at the top? So when you look down in the forest or even in your yard, sometimes you can see cool stuff down there. I also really like how water drops look on plants. Thank you. Okay, we can look down, but we can also look up. And branches are cool and clouds are cool. I have a little telescope that can look at the moon in very close-up ways. Yeah, so that's fun. And looking very close at close things. Does anyone have a guess about what this is? We have a teacher who can call on someone? Yes. This one right here. I declined the pointer and now I'm regretting it. You know what it is? You don't have to know. That's okay. Do you know what it is? It's a plant. Yes, correct.
It's a plant that when it grows up, the frogs, they get the nose and they eat the bugs.
Oh, like a fly trap kind of plant? Okay, this one is a fern. And I have ferns in my yard, and in the spring, they uncurl from spirals, which I think is super cool. And I like to look close at that. Does anyone know what the top right is? Yeah.
A rock, but it's like those little rocks that you see in Florida.
Where a rock in Florida? It is a rock, that's correct. It's actually an agate, and I love to collect agates. A lot of kids love to collect rocks, and some adults too. I especially like agates with the bands on them. I have some show and tell agates, but they're kind of small for you to see. But can you see bands on there? Stripes? You can't, it's too far away. Okay, you'd have to look close. What can I tell you? This other one is lichen on a rock up on the North Shore of Lake Superior. There are lots of ways you can look close. I like to use a magnifying glass or hand lens, which this is mine. There are also little bitty plastic ones that you can get. Maybe your teachers have those for looking close. And then I have this very cool, this is actually for the next, you can look even closer with a little bitty microscope. It's so fun, isn't it? So this one has a little light and you set it down and you can see like really close. This actually snowflake is not using this, it's using my phone camera. If you just zoom way in on your phone camera, ask your grown-ups, you can see all kinds of detail and it's cool. But I know that some of you were talking about 10 beautiful things. Oh, thank you. Some of you were talking in class about beautiful things that maybe aren't super pretty to look at. And here are some examples of that. This one is not a brain. It is rhubarb growing in my yard that comes out, you know how big rhubarb leaves are? Like the size of you. It comes out all scrunched up, and so it looks kind of like a brain, which is kind of ugly, but also kind of awesome. And that guy is a cicada. And I know we had a lot. Oh, everybody's excited about that. So, thank you. This is an exoskeleton of a cicada. And yes, some people think it's gross. I think it's cool. This guy who is green and has wings came out of this little brown bug. So if you look like in August, especially on your front steps or on like a warm rock, you can see these exoskeletons clinging on. Yeah, exactly. And it's broken open because this isn't a dead creature. This is just the outside shell of a guy like that who, came out with wings. And of course, mushrooms, right? So we'll see if this works with my laptop, but sometimes sounds are beautiful or smells, and that's in the book too. Now, you have to be really quiet to hear this, I think. We'll see if you can even hear this. Does anybody have a guess about what that sound is? If teachers could help me pick people, that would be great. It does sound like a cicada. This one is not a cicada, but that was a really good guess. It sounds like crickets. It's not crickets either. Oh, these are really good guesses.
Is it frogs or something?
It's frogs. They're spring peepers. I know, and you can't see them because they're tiny. And also, thank you. Also, when you get close to them, they stop. So then you really can't find them. They do sound like crickets. These are frogs though. Okay, you ready for another one? Oh, shoot. Yeah. Okay. Water. That's a rainstorm. We were having a really big drought at the time. And so I made a little video of that sound of rain coming down in my garden, which was so, so nice to hear. Okay, are we ready for another? Be very, very quiet. See if I can find it. Okay, do we have a guess about what that is? Wind, you can hear wind. You can hear wind. There's also another sound in there that you may or may not have been able to hear. The trees. So this is a video of trees knocking together in a forest. This is at Iona's Beach, which is on Lake Superior. And do you know, I found out that this is something that trees do to keep each other safe in a storm. Because if they knock into each other, they slow each other down. So a big strong wind will knock one single tree all the way over. But if they're in the forest, they can knock into each other and both trees might lose a branch or two, but neither one of them falls down. So I thought that was a really cool way that trees take care of each other in a forest. And you could hear, next time you're in a forest and it's very windy, listen for the knocking together sound of those trees up top. Okay, I have one more. Are we ready? We can do one more. Okay, quiet and listening. Do you hear that? Okay. Does anyone have a guess about what that noise is? Bees buzzing. Okay, here's a cool thing I learned about bees. Some people are afraid of bees, okay, but bees are pollinators, so the plants need them. This is a rose bush, and I learned that flowers can make their nectar sweeter when they hear that sound of bees buzzing, because the flowers want to be pollinated, okay? So isn't that interesting that that sound of buzzing is a very happy sound if you're a flower? Okay, and it makes me happy too. Okay, so we have all of our beautiful things. We've collected them in seasons and high and low and near and far. And sometimes you can pick them up, but sometimes you can't. And if you can't collect them, you can make a list or a drawing or take a picture. I really like to take pictures, and so that's what I've been using on all these slides is my photos with my big camera. But I've been trying to draw some too. I'm not an illustrator, but I spent about a year drawing a bird every day. So these are some of my birds that I drew. But I collect all kinds of stuff, and I've been showing you all kinds of stuff throughout. I brought a tiny, tiny amount of my huge collections of things. So, you know, my rule is that you can collect it if an animal doesn't need it anymore. So like this is part of a beehive. The bees aren't using it. They're done. So I could take it home with me. Also, if there's a lot of something and you want to take one, like 100 pine cones under a tree, it's okay to take a pine cone. The tree doesn't need all 100 of them. Okay. Yeah, this is an old piece of beehive or maybe a wasp nest. Yeah. So if you can't take it, if an animal still needs it, or if there's only one, then I would draw it or take a picture or something for later. So once you have all your beautiful things, sometimes you need to learn more. So I have a question for you. And you can raise your hand and a teacher can call on you. What are, thank you. What are some ways that you can learn more about a beautiful thing? Look it up where? Like on a phone, yeah? On Instagram. Any other things we could do to learn more? Uh-huh.
In the green jacket, honey. I don't know your name.
I can't.
Excuse me, second graders, we cannot hear, thank you. Oh, actually grown up.
Asking grown-ups is a good thing to do. What about one of these? We could read a book. Maybe the library. Yeah, good. Thank you. The library has a lot of books. The internet has a lot of information. Grown-ups have information. I also actually have apps on my phone. People are very critical of screen time, but I have an app called the Seek app, where you take a picture of something and it tells you what it is. So then you can look it up knowing the name of a thing. I also have an app called Merlin Bird ID that has a microphone in it. So you touch the microphone button and it listens and it hears a bird song and it tells you what bird that is. Because sometimes you can't see the bird, right? Sometimes you're just hearing the bird. So this is actually a picture of a bug that we had at the cabin. We rent a little cabin, and I was terrified of this bug because it was like really big and it looked like a mosquito, but giant. And I was like, but I used my Seek app and I took a picture of it and it told me that it's a crane fly. And that not only do crane flies not sting you, they don't bite, they don't sting you, they don't hurt you. They eat bugs that sting you and bite you and hurt you. They eat mosquitoes and stuff. So, hey, I was afraid of this guy and I did not need to be. That is a beneficial creature. And then I was like, what a pretty bug. Isn't it a pretty bug? So sometimes if you're curious about it and you look it up, you can learn more. Okay. We only have like 5 minutes, so I'm going to bust through some process stuff for this book. That was super fun, you guys. This book was inspired by looking for beautiful things, also heart-shaped rocks, which I love. I was actually on a road trip through Iowa and Nebraska looking for sandhill cranes that migrate through the Platte River Valley. So it was 2009, and we were, that's not the prettiest time of year in Iowa, let me just say. March, April, not gorgeous. So I was really surprised at how pretty it was to see these cranes flying and roosting, and it's very beautiful stuff. But then the book took a very long time from there. So in the early drafts, there's sandhill cranes. And when I have bigger kids or grown-up writers, I go into all this, but the book changed a lot. It was very long. It had a kid on a vacation, and it had the sandhill cranes migrating, and it was the whole thing. So it changed a lot before I sold it to a publisher. And then once I had an editor for it, it changed a lot again and again and again and again and again. And then the publisher finds an illustrator for the book. So I'm not in charge of that. They had worked with Maribel Lechuga on a book called Seaside Stroll, which you should look up because it's gorgeous. And so they wanted her to do this book. And I was like, okay, but she lives in Spain. And I was like, is she going to know anything about Iowa and what Iowa looks like? And is she going to do a good job with Iowa? But she really did. She did a ton of research. She looked at lots of reference photos. She asked questions. And she, I think, nailed it. So you don't even have to live in the place in order to learn about a place, right? And then she came up with how the characters looked, which was not in the story. She, made Graham that great sweater and glasses, and Lily was actually quite a bit older in the early drafts, and she got younger and cuter and younger and cuter. And then one thing that was funny was they don't have the same car seat laws in Spain that we do. And so we had to add a booster seat in for Lily because at that age, she would be in a booster in the back of the car. So, all of these things change over time, and the illustrator makes changes. They start with what's called a dummy, which means a storyboard of 32 pages. Yeah, not that kind of dummy. So what a dummy means in picture book land, thank you, is mapping out the story onto 32 pages. Did you know that picture books are pretty much all 32 pages? And that is because of how they come off of the printing press, and then they get folded and cut into the 16 spreads of a picture book. So that's the illustrator's job. And then she does sketches for each page. So what I'm going to show you for a bunch of different pages is the initial sketch, the polished up sketch, and the final art so that you can see how it changed over time. So here's the rough sketch of the windmill scene. And there's the polished sketch of the windmill scene. And then there's the final art. And all kinds of stuff happens in there and changes get made on her end. And I'm also cutting a bunch of text at that point because stuff that's in the art doesn't have to be in the text as well. So here's her rough sketch of this barn and then her polished sketch of that barn. And at that point I got to see it and I said, that's not falling apart enough. Have you seen a falling apart barn? You know, like really we need skeletal. So that's what she came up with. So you can see how upright that barn is and then how falling apart that barn is. And I love this image. I think it's really great. Okay, here's the mud, smelling the mud scene and the polished sketch and the final art. And I really love this image. And I actually had a little peg doll made of this lily smelling the mud. And this lives on my desk to remind me to like chill out and breathe. Okay, one more, I think, storm in rough sketch, polished, and final art. The storms in Iowa are the best storms in the world. You guys have the best lightning. You have the best thunder. It's very dramatic and beautiful because of that big sky. So I was really glad she nailed it with that one. And then they make a cover. The cover does not come at the beginning. The cover actually comes at the end when they've made all this art. And then they decide what they want that big image to be that goes with the book everywhere. And then it looks like this. But then, okay, it was ready to be published. Okay, it's taken a long time. But then we had a pandemic, so it got delayed again. And then finally it came out in 2021. So I've been able to share the book with kids and to hear usually on social media, parents will post their kids out looking for beautiful things. I heard some of you were doing this on the bus, which is great. And sometimes teachers will send me drawings that kids have made and stuff. And that's wonderful for me to see. And then in the lobby, they made a whole exhibit of photos that people sent of beautiful things, which is so cool. And I love that people were out there taking pictures of beautiful stuff in their world. Here's my most recent beautiful thing. So my family takes hikes on Sunday mornings. And this is a downy woodpecker. It was a rainy, icky day, but this little guy peeked out at me and that made me really happy. So thank you, teacher. Oh, look at that, 10:45. Yes. Okay, I promised we'd be done at 10:45. So these are my other books. I have a bunch of other books, including the newest one is called Just Us, and it's about a family that gets snowed in at Thanksgiving and their relatives can't all come. So I don't know that we have time for questions. That's a bummer. Okay, that's okay. And then I have 2 books coming out next year that I would love for you all to get a hold of. Far, Far Away is about a canoe camping trip in the Boundary Waters. And Rings of Heartwood is about how animals grow, and it's got poems and nonfiction. And a lot of these critters that we've been talking about, tadpoles, cicadas, those critters are all in that book about how the cool ways that animals grow and change. And thank you, friends, so much for your good listening and for looking for beautiful things on your way here. And I hear you're walking, right, from here? So you can totally do that on your way back too. Thank you.
Second grade, thank you.